What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Bull Combo, your source for album reviews, vlogs, live music, and whatever the hell else I decide to post. I know it's been a few months since my last video. To be honest with you, I had an external hard drive die on me. I lost a bunch of content. On top of that, YouTube's been pretty crazy with their copyright stuff lately. They kind of turned me off to the platform. I just needed to take a break, step away, come back refreshed, and feel like I could bring you guys videos that I was happy with and that you guys would enjoy. So, I'm back. Thank you guys for sticking around. For those of you that didn't, it's totally fine, I totally understand. So now that we're back in the swing of things, we're back on the album review cycle, and this week we're going to be talking Motionless in White's latest album, Disguise. So stick around while I let you guys know why this might be the most impressive album by Motionless in White to date. So I followed Motionless in White for quite a few years, all the way back to the Creatures album, which admittedly has a much different sound than the sound that Motionless in White has adopted in recent years. And Disguise is really no different in that respect. It's definitely a logical evolution for the band, and it feels like they're really honing in on the sound that makes them them. So Disguise is 11 tracks, which makes it pretty standard for today's metal, hardcore, rock albums that are out. The production quality on this album is top-notch. It's the highest it's ever been. Specifically, the vocal production and vocal quality is just so much more noticeably improved from their previous albums. It's clear that they took the time to make sure the vocals sit right in the mix and possibly even rise a little bit higher in the mix than in previous albums. And that's okay, because I think on this album Chris is doing things vocally that he's never done before. And the range and variety that Chris has on display right now is not only refreshing, but it's pretty damn impressive, to be honest with you. We're hearing him do a lot of stuff that he's never done before, and he does it really well, and I think that's going to be a nice treat for Motionless fans on this album. The band is definitely experimenting on this album a little bit more with different sounds. It's clear that this album has more of a hard rock vibe to it than the metalcore vibes on their previous albums, which is fine because they still stick to those really strong choruses that really make Motionless in White who they are. And this album's definitely no different. It's pretty clear, though, that they were writing these songs to have a little bit more weight live. I know they're playing a lot of arena shows and big shows now, big summer festivals, things like that, and it's pretty clear that these songs were written to have more weight and have more punch in those scenarios, which is totally fine because that's the logical progression for Motionless. And when you're playing those kinds of shows, you're going to write content that matches the feel of your live performances, so I think that that's really cool. Now, I know previously Motionless in White has been compared to a lot of different bands, most notably Breaking Benjamin, as there are some similarities in some of their previous songs. And I don't think that this album quite does that like the previous albums do. This album definitely has more of a unique sound to it. It definitely sounds like Motionless was trying to develop their own sound on this album, and I think that diversity is kind of a byproduct of that. This album definitely stands apart from their previous stuff. It's very clear that they were trying to add a lot of diversity on this album and trying to do a lot of new things that they haven't done previously musically. And whenever a band does that, I think it's, obviously it can be hit or miss. In this instance, I think Motionless in White definitely hit the nail on the head. They were able to retain some of their previous sound while kind of moving that sound forward in a logical progression. So those really catchy choruses are still there. In fact, I think they're probably sprinkled more throughout the album than previously. Something that is noticeably lacking on this album is definitely the industrial metal sound. I think there's only two songs that really have that industrial metal sound. That would be Broadcasting from the Grave and Brand New Numb. Those are the two that I think really incorporate the sound that a lot of people had known Motionless in White to have, that industrial style metal vibe. Whereas a few more of the songs on this album are more of a straight hard rock anthematic style, which really fits the band well in this writing style and on this album specifically. So while it's a change, it's not going to be a change that's too unfamiliar for people to digest. Just because Motionless in White has veered away from that Breaking Benjamin-esque sound doesn't mean that there aren't nods and throwbacks to some of those previous nu metal, hard rock, and grunge bands from the early 2000s. And those throwbacks and nods are very evident on this album. The song Code has a really strong chorus, and it's very reminiscent of Linkin Park on a lot of the melodies and the vocal changes in the chorus itself, as well as the song Headache, which has a very similar vibe in the pre-chorus, a very Linkin Park-ish vibe in the pre-chorus. I think that was pretty cool that they did that. There's also a couple songs that reference things from Nirvana, as well as some Breaking Benjamin references if you're savvy and you know some of their early stuff. So I really do like the fact that rather than taking the sounds from these previous bands Aside from the Linkin Park comparison, I think it was more about referencing the previous bands than trying to take their sounds on this album, and I think that the end result was a really unique album that sounds more like what Motionless in White should be writing today. Now, the first few songs on the album actually have a very, very hard rock vibe, and it's not until Thoughts and Prayers that the album really opens up into a heavier sound. Thoughts and Prayers is also probably one of the heaviest songs that Motionless in White has ever written. It doesn't necessarily have anything crazier than any of their other songs. It's just the progression and the riffs that they're using. It's extremely, extremely heavy, and I think that's going to be a fan favorite, especially at the live shows. The pits are going to go crazy for that song. But that was really a changing point on the album, as the previous few songs definitely had a hard rock, anthematic vibe to them. When Thoughts and Prayers kicked in, it was an obvious change in tone, extremely aggressive, extremely fast, probably most reminiscent to Motionless in White's earlier work. Motionless also has a song on here called Undead Ahead 2, which is obviously a spiritual successor to the song Undead Ahead off of their Creatures album. Now, I don't really feel like this song has a Creatures vibe to it very much. It's definitely a heavy song, definitely has cool breakdowns and stuff like that, but it's heavy in the style of newer Motionless in White heavy. It doesn't really have that Creatures vibe, that straight metalcore vibe that Creatures really put on display. So it definitely is more of a spiritual successor than a successor in sound. There's a couple lines in the song that are the same as in the previous song, but aside from that, the song is really its own song. And again, it's more of a spiritual successor to Undead Ahead than anything. Again, I think the most impressive part about this whole album is just the diversity that was put on display throughout the whole thing. I feel like each song has a different vibe back to back. They didn't really put two songs up against each other that had very similar sounds. And because they didn't do that, the album definitely feels like it takes you on a bit of a journey. It's definitely a journey in sound. It's not the same sound over and over again. And you know, some bands can get stuck into that repetition where they write the same song 10 different times. And you know, there will be a core fan base that really enjoys that, but then the larger, broader fan base is probably going to look for things that are a little more diverse with a little more variety. And I don't think Motionless in White disappoints on this album at all. I think they include all of that variety and all of that diversity that can really bring them to the next level here. As I was listening to this album, I couldn't help but think how far Motionless in White has come since the Creatures album, since those metalcore days. And it's really cool to see how much they've carved their own niche, and just to see how huge they are as a band now. They're absolutely massive. And while there's been comparisons to them sounding like Breaking Benjamin and things like that, they're actually achieving that level of fame in the metal scene right now, where they're playing with Breaking Benjamin, they're playing with Korn, they're playing with these bands that obviously influenced them. So it's really cool to see how they're being embraced by the metal community. And I think that this album is definitely sort of a gift and a thank you to the metal community for sticking with them. And as a whole, I really don't have any complaints about this album. Again, it was my first listen through. I might have some more things to say as I listen through it again. But at this point, I think it's a really solid album. I think Motionless in White fans are really going to be a huge fan of the diversity on display here, and it's going to end up being one of the fan favorite albums from this band. So guys, I really hope you check this album out. It comes out this Friday, June 7th on all music platforms, iTunes, Spotify, Google Play. There's probably going to be physical albums available in album stores, so make sure to go out and pick up a copy of this in some way, shape, or form. Make sure to support these guys if you're a fan of them. I also want to thank you guys for checking out this video. I know, again, I haven't been around for a few months, so I really appreciate everyone sticking around, liking the videos, watching them, subscribing. Your support is super awesome, guys. And if you do like this content and you're not subscribed, make sure to hit that subscribe button and click the bell to get notified when I post new videos. I will be coming at you guys with more album reviews here over the next few weeks. This year has been noticeably absent of major releases from metal hardcore bands. I know I did miss a few in my little brief hiatus there, but overall I don't feel like this year has had nearly as many album releases as some of the previous years. Hopefully that changes as the last half of the year progresses, and maybe we can finish this year strong with some awesome albums and some great reviews. So other than that, guys, I would like to thank you for checking out this video. As always, I hope you guys have a great day, and until next time, we will see you soon.